Welcome. My name is Jordan Pease. I'm the director of the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library in Ashland, Oregon, and we're the organizing sponsors for this event, A World Gone Mad, Mind Control and Sociopaths in Our Lives. It's very gratifying for me to be standing here with this great panel of friends who heartily agreed to coordinate this event with me. So we're going to just do a little free-form Q&A right now. There's no script to this. This is mostly for the benefit of the audience to engage the panel. I'm going to kind of experiment exactly with the logistics of this. So trust me that we're just going to experiment a little bit in the interest of getting the best recording that we can. So I think I'm going to try asking audience to ask brief questions. What I'll probably end up doing, though, is passing the mic, because I don't want to try and put in my words your questions. So, but I will ask the speakers to make brief comments as they start the panel to just encapsulate the remarks they made in their awesome lectures. Can we just get a round of applause for these guys? This is really important material that we covered today, and I just want to acknowledge the audience again for coming and recognizing the value and import of these subjects. So, Lori, you're up. And I think your mic is good.
You want me to encapsulate what I presented? Okay. To encapsulate what I presented, I'd have to say, in my direct personal experience with real people who have lived through this, I can say that this is real. And it goes to a depth. I only shared a little bit of what some of these people have experienced. But what Fred spoke about with a kitten is just that much of it. That the level of trauma that is produced, not just physically, but emotionally to all the carrying parts of a person, what they're forced to do, what they're made to feel responsible for, is part of that trauma too, and it's real. And then we spoke about what the characteristics of a psychopath are, and how their brains are different, how they're different from our brains, and how the way our brains work brings us information. If we know that, it brings us information about not only what they already know and are using to manipulate our own brains, but how we can prevent their manipulating us by knowing our own brains better, by owning our own brains, by owning our own emotional systems and our body responses, not like a, crunch it down, but a learning to be conscious with it and aware and open and alive, so that when those influences come at us, we aren't hooked by it. We don't have the fear and self-doubt or stress level that they're counting on, that we actually can direct our own attention. That alone is an amazing thing, that we can direct our attention into something that nourishes us instead of living in fear. And that is a level of empowerment that is right here for us. We do have to bring our attention to it and make an effort for it, but we're putting our attention and effort into a whole lot of things that don't serve us. Let's put it into this, because it changes not only us, it changes the whole world.
We are blessed to live in very exciting times.
Interesting times. The Chinese curse.
I guess the one comment I want to make is that the thing that's actually very exciting is, from my understanding, having researched this pretty thoroughly and almost full-time for 12 years now, the group that was kind of controlling the planet, for lack of a better word, to the best of their ability, very few people had access to even any kind of knowledge about what they were doing. So it was very easy for them to be pretty united. And they did have factions, they've always had factions, but the infighting between the factions was not that big. With the advent of the internet, which, by the way, was invented by the military, DARPA, then information relatively suddenly became available to all of us. And now you are sitting here because all of us have had the chance to learn this stuff, and we're spreading like wildfire. And this is causing that controlling group to have serious problems. And we're talking over the break, they're kind of running scared. They're becoming more fractured. The factions are really fighting against each other because some see the value in saving the planet and not totally trashing it, and others don't. And so it's actually exciting that control group is kind of putting out fires, whereas in the past they were totally had everything under control. So I truly think it's exciting times, and it's because people like you and me are waking up all over the place. It's actually kind of fun to do this. So, yay, let's have fun.
Yes.
I thought Al Gore invented the internet. My mistake. No, I mean, this has been great. I mean, I guess to encapsulate what we were discussing, at least in my presentation, was that there are a lot of dark forces out there, and but when you shed light on them, they become visible, and now you have a newfound knowledge going forward, and you can use that to empower yourself and to empower others, and to make a change in the world. And that's what this is all about. I think that's why we're all here, is because we see these problems, we want to address them, and we want to change them. And so let's do that together. I'm excited about contributing and being a part of that change, and meeting new people like Fred and Lori and all of you. And I think collaboratively, there's power in numbers, you know. So I think collaboratively we have a shot at making a difference in the future. And you know, I have children. I'm leaving this planet to them at some point, you know, and their children, and like a lot of you, I'm sure. So we need to always consider that it's not, you know, this is not our planet. We're just here for a brief period of time, and you know, we need to make sure that we leave it in better than what it was when we got here, not worse, as we move on through our spiritual journey. So, yeah, that's about it.
Okay, we're going to pass the mic to those with questions, but I would ask that we keep it to questions, not to statements, please. And I would like to introduce Kat Souter, who's going to be my mic runner, and we're going to be a very careful job keeping it away from here.
Hi, this is a question for you, Fred. Just a moment ago, you said that the power elite is less unified and becoming more fractured. How do you know that? What is your source for coming by that information?
And who are they? That was my question. Oh, you know, it's one of those things that because it never makes the news, most people have no idea, but I've been following this and watching. There's tons of little signs all over the place. You know, one of the things I can tell you is that 9/11 was a seminal event that changed the whole planet. As you know, the whole planet was focused on that time and what was going on. And there are literally thousands of people who were somehow involved in that, who didn't realize what was going to happen. And when it happened, they got very upset. So many people, and there are also many people who were very smart, a lot of pilots, even military pilots, who knew instantly there's no way.
Right.
And so they instantly became a force for change on this planet. And they basically said, this is wrong. So 9/11 was one of the big catalysts that caused a big fracture. And that to me is exciting. And then since then, there's just more and more fractures, because those people are now saying, okay, if they're pulling this over our eyes, what else are they doing? That's how I got it. When I first learned actually about the UFO cover-up, it's like, if that's going on, what else is going on? And then I started learning about mind control and everything else. So 9/11 was actually a key. It didn't go the way they had hoped. They hoped to have martial law, is my own belief. So there's lots of evidence, and I wish I could somehow focus on just publishing all that, because people would be very excited. I know, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
It was because of the UFO phenomena that Fred and I are acquainted. That's another story.
Yes.
This is a question for whoever wants to take it. How do you or how do we talk to, we'll say, the uninitiated about mind control? Because in my experience, there is no topic or there's no phrase that shuts down the processing of a person when talking about alternative subjects faster than the phrase mind control. I can say 9/11, I can say UFOs, I can say crystals, whatever. As soon as I say mind control, it's true. As soon as I say, have you looked into mind control, they're like, instantly off. And that's the origin of the phrase tinfoil hat, is, it's about the mind control topic. It's just immediate ridicule and shame, which is a tragedy, but how do you go about talking to people about the subject and introducing it in a way that people will be receptive?
That's a great question, and it's something that we all face. And I agree. If I start talking about sometimes I do. Just throw some seeds out and then see what reaction I get. And I'll just say a little bit, and then just talk about something else. And I talk about it in passing. And I don't necessarily use the word mind control, but I talk about, well, maybe there's something behind this. And more I'm seeing there's something behind what they're doing. I mean, don't you feel like everyone's getting stressed out about everything, and just to comment to what's going on? And in my research, I'm getting there's an intent behind that. And it's when someone's a little more open, I might say mind control, but using more ordinary observations of the world, but from a bigger picture. And I get reactions sometimes, but I say it anyway, is, there are people who are benefiting from this. There are people way higher than political leaders and the surface banking. They're the ones who own the banks. They're the ones who own the central banks. And they're really benefiting from this. So what are they getting? Follow the money. What are they getting out of it? And so I kind of ask questions. And sometimes people like me enough, they'll be polite and they won't roll their eyes, but they start to tolerate those kinds of comments, as long as I don't bore in and dig in. And so it's kind of planting seeds. That's kind of how I do it.
I'll just throw out a quick idea. You could say something like, if it feels like it's the right time, so, well, do you know, or have you looked at all about mind control? And if you see do you know how it's being used to transform our planet? And start talking about that. And then at some point, do you know also how it's been used in other ways too? So you can actually gauge their reaction. Because sometimes people go, yes, I have looked into that, and start a whole conversation. Just an idea.
Yeah, these are really tough topics, and you got to be careful with who you share this information with too in some cases. I mean, I would love to share it with everyone, but not everyone is going to be exactly receptive to it. So, but for people that are even somewhat receptive, I mean, you just need to realize that a lot of people have, these really tight egos that are so intact that they just cannot let it go long enough to think that maybe it's possible that they are being controlled in some way. But when you finally let that ego down and you realize that things aren't exactly the way you thought they were, it becomes a lot easier to kind of embrace the idea that mind control can take place and that we can be moved to do things that we had no idea, were happening behind the scenes, I guess. So,
I would add to that both great points. Part of it is how well do you know the person, and is there trust? Can you say some things to that person? Because timing is everything, and if it's not our agenda that gets us to say it, and instead we can listen to where there's an opening. And that's why I'll say little things, and I'll say it sometimes just, half in jest, because I'm kind of, okay, is there an opening? And but with the people I'm closer to, then I do talk about it more. And sometimes I get some reaction, but I'll soften it, or I'll pay attention. How much? Because I know what I went through to let this stuff in, and how often my brain was tweaked, and I just had to leave it alone for a while and let it process, because it was touching all that fear. Because you're touching fear in people, fear of the world, fear of survival, what's going to happen to them if I let it, what's going to happen to me if I let in that this mind control is going on everywhere? That means I'm being duped, I'm a pawn, and I'm in danger. And that's scary. So if we can be kind with that and listen, I think we get a lot more doors opening.
Yes.
This is just a question to the panel in general. I would be interested in hearing any ideas that the panel may have on how to move forward from this point get this information. Now, I wouldn't even call it information, but wisdom or insight out there. It seems like time is a little short, and there are the forces of mind control are now amping up the technology and leveraging, different internet and technologies. And how can we prevent this planet from turning into a mind control hell? Certainly.
First opening on that.
Well, I first have to admit my bias. I've always been an optimist, even in looking at the deepest, darkest levels of this. My own personal belief is if we blow up our planet, our souls will recongeal and we'll form something else and see if we can't do better next time. So for me, there is no sense of urgency. And I think, in fact, if you're feeling a sense of urgency, sometimes that's just a fear response. And actually, if I'm just doing my best in each moment and really focus on doing the best with what I can, then I feel like I can be much more effective. And what I know for me personally is I tend to be the one-man warrior, want to go out there and save the world. I take after my dad, who was here earlier, and I'm going to save the world. And actually, I don't think that works. I know that doesn't work. What I need is I need you. And then you and all of us. And it's when I can reach out and say, let's collaborate and ask that question with you. I don't know the answer, but I'm exploring and I want to find out. And I know that it's coming together in groups and doing things like this, and Jordan putting on this conference, and that this will go up in video, and then you could share this with your friends through video, those who are open in it. And it is spreading, and yes, we all wish it would go more quickly. I would love it to go more quickly. But what about if we just relax and just trust that it's all unfolding the way it's supposed to?
Yes.
Do you have anything to add, Jeff?
Well, I'm always an optimist too, so I try to come from it with that. But I do kind of get caught up in wanting to change things quicker too. So I understand. I mean, that's a good question. There's nothing wrong with feeling that way either. And knowing that our time here is limited too, so it's like we want to speed this up and see the change before our time ends. But that might not happen. And once again, I do think that things are kind of speeding up, though. I do think that just being here to me is it shows that there's a growth taking place and a movement that's creating change around this world, and it's pretty exciting. I find it very exciting, and I think that we need to keep communication with one another. We need to maybe join a Facebook group where we can share ideas and videos and posts, and then share them with our other friends and bring them into our group, and use this social media for something that makes this change and ramps it up and maybe creates it a little faster.
Okay, I can well relate to the impatience. But I've also had some 45 years to work with that. And I had visuals back when I was around 20 or so, and of what was coming, and had to deal with that and get over the panic and realize that it takes us step by step, day by day, paying attention to what's in front of us, to what we can do. That is when we're most effective. If we're in the urgency and the fear, we can't be clear. We're talking about that. So how can I take responsibility? How can I be as present and clear to what's needed and offer that? And if something appears, say yes to it. Like this. I haven't done something like this. And I've taught this material to people in the field, but take the step that offers itself and be clear-headed enough to listen to it. So that's what I try to do, is to pay attention to where it opens and say yes.
I'm going to take my own opportunity here for a moment. There's a really important point that is really my particular motivation for endeavoring to do what we're sitting here doing, and it's why there's puzzle pieces in our logo. And this, I'm just going to share a little bit of a personal anecdote, and ask the panel to elaborate on these points. Lori and I have talked about this. 9/11's been mentioned a lot here today, and I think it's a great example of some of these ideas. And I think we've all experienced this too, as we talk with our family and friends about these controversial subjects. And so for me, until I understood the idea of sociopathy, I couldn't quite go all the way there on things like 9/11. So that's this missing piece concept for me. And so if the panel has ideas to elaborate on that particular point. Also this idea, and I'm not sure matriculate is the right term for it, and Lori and I have discussed this idea, but I don't know if those of you who read this on the website, this idea about sociopaths craving control and power find their way into upper echelons, into the enclaves, I think was the word we used, of the world's power structures. So I'm kind of espousing my own particular philosophy right here, which I don't exactly mean to do, but I guess it's important that people that are here understand what drove me anyway to organize this event. But I know that Lori can elaborate on this a little bit too, but invite the panel to as well. Thank you.
As far as the missing piece is concerned, just on an ability to be present, okay, to say a little more to this. If we don't know what's going on, then there's always a certain level of distress. If we don't know how those puzzle pieces fit together and we can't make sense of it, our brain is hardwired to make sense of our world. And if it can't, then there's a part of us that's always on alert, because I don't know what's going to happen and I don't know when it's going to happen. And so we end up on alert. Our amygdala is like partway on. And when we can make sense of it, when we have the truth about something, no matter how ugly it is, our nervous system calms. We can stay more present to what's next. We can meet it and move with it and be more alive to it. But when we don't have those missing pieces, when we can't make sense of why would someone do this? They're so different. How can I make sense of how different they are? We have, in this information age and technology age, it's brought us the gift of understanding that better. And when we can share that and share it with each other and make sense of it, then we can go, oh, okay, now I see what we're working with. And we can join together and do something with it. We can create a plan. We can move and act whatever our particular talents are. But if we don't know what's going on, then it's these scattered dangers. And that's how our system perceives it. So it's really, really important to get back behind the events and see what's happening and make sense of it.
Well, you might be surprised to hear that I was actually a debunker up until July of 2001. My own housemate was a conspiracy theorist who believed the planet was run by a small group of people and all this stuff. And I was always like, I've been there in the meetings watching these people, and it doesn't happen there, I'm telling you. When I was interpreting for presidents, I saw some things, but it didn't at all feel like a big conspiracy. It happens 3 levels down. And so when it was actually a video on UFOs that just shook me up. Stephen Greer, I'm sure some of you know him, in the Disclosure Project, that's what woke me up. But it's still, then I started finding out all these things, and 9/11 happened. So, but how can they do this? And I was really researching it thoroughly, and there was plenty of evidence that I believed it, but I couldn't get how this happens. And it wasn't until a year later, after my awakening, somebody turned me on to mind control. I didn't know about it till then, and told me to read this particular book, and it's like, oh my God. And then once I started diving into mind control, oh my God, now it all makes sense. So it's just the pieces of the puzzle coming together, and suddenly it's like, oh, and that understanding, not that I know everything by any means, but now I can see how they would do it with just small numbers of people. Because the whole question is, how can they do this and keep it so secret, small numbers of people? Once you understand this piece, it all makes sense. Just that big piece. And so that made a huge difference for me, and makes it important. And then, of course, the psychopath ties right in with the mind control stuff. So.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, when you start putting a puzzle together, you start with the outer pieces and you work inward. And at some point, I guess you get to a point where you see, okay, this is the picture. Maybe that you're not done with the puzzle yet, but you can see, okay, this is the picture. And, it starts coming together quicker and easier and faster. And I think, this is just one small piece in that puzzle. But you guys need to go out there and find other pieces for you. I mean, there's a table of books over here and videos. So, I mean, I just encourage, continue the knowledge and the learning and putting the little pieces together for yourself. And that's all, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, what I need to continue doing as well. I mean, I don't think I'll ever stop learning as I move forward in life. It's just a journey of learning and knowledge and gaining as much as possible. So maybe the puzzle will never fully come together. I don't know. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. But maybe I'll at least be able to see the picture of the puzzle. And once again, staying in the moment. My wife put a little note into my wallet one day, and I've kept it there for, how long has it been in there now? 5, 10 years? Quite a while. It just says, stay in the moment. And that's really important to remember, because you can get really overwhelmed with this stuff. But when I open my wallet, which I do several times a day, of course, especially with a 10 and a 13-year-old, seems like I'm opening it constantly. I see that, and it reminds me, it's just, this is all you have. This is all you can control, is this very moment that you're in. So that's, thanks, Karen.
Other questions? Go over here first. I meant to say earlier, and I hope you all realize this by now, thank you, Aaron, what the tip of the iceberg has been delivered here. These are really deep subjects, so I just really want to make sure everybody understands that.
Yeah.
All right, this question's for Jeff. What's your take on as far as mind control and fluoridation of water?
It's a good question. It's that and the chemtrails, I think I honestly don't know enough about it to make an informed decision on whether I believe it or not. But I felt the same way about a lot of topics that now I'm completely open to explore further. And so I need to look into them more. But I mean, I think there's some validity. And when you're talking about people that would do the kind of things that we've witnessed, why would they not do that also? I wouldn't put anything past these people. So yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, for my research, fluoridation of water started in Nazi Germany, concentration camps. They found they needed less guards to watch the prisoners that were fluoridated because they're more passive. And in our Constitution, it's illegal to medicate the water, which they do with fluoride. So, I don't know, something to think about.
Absolutely.
Of all the chemicals they could be putting on our water, it ends up being sodium fluoride. Fred, do you want to answer that question?
Just add something.
Please do.
Yeah, if anybody's curious, do some research about how it got started. And you might find, if you follow the money, that actually was made some people a lot of profit. And it was a convenient way to get rid of waste that would have just been pure waste, and make a lot of money for some people.
Right. Right. I agree on that. And as far as the pacification, if you can't think clearly, you're going to be more fearful. And that, or never even question. So if you have a population that doesn't question, and you have something very easy and you can sell it, it's been hugely disproven, but to sell it, oh, it's good for your children, then, and we will poison your brain at the same time as it's a win-win.
You know, you did it again and said that we will poison your brain. And I'm still sitting here with I know it's part of the puzzle, but who's the we? Is it the company making the fluoride? Is it just they want to make some money? Or is it this group that we're talking about, the controlling group behind the central banks? Or is it these cults that are, you know, diversified and they're just doing their own thing? Is there really, can we follow this pyramid and sort of talk about where is it central control? Is it diversified control? And at least get your opinions about it. Like, who's the we?
Very
question.
Great question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who's the we? Great
Yes,
question. Who
yes.
wants to start? I'm going to ask Fred to start
Yeah.
about that.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I love this question because what I find is our minds want to put everything into neat little boxes so that we can understand it, and it just doesn't work that way. We try, right?
try.
And so the we is very vague and amorphous. And so what I do is I bring it back to me because I know I am a part of that we. And something I'm doing on some level is having an impact on that level. And so, yes, I do want to understand how the power elite works. I want to understand how, you know, the greedy bankers work and all that kind of stuff. But the most powerful thing I can do is see that I am a part of this we. And I know there's a way that I haven't cleaned my, because if I have a belief that everything every one of us does impacts the whole, and that somehow I am responsible for everything that happens in the universe. And I feel sad about that because I look at what's happening. There's so much sadness and torture and all that sort of stuff. But my deepest inquiry is, how am I causing that? How am I playing a part in that? And I can tell you, you know, I believe in, I have knowledge. In my understanding, there are past lives. And I did some terrible things in past lives. For one particular past life, I was the chief of a torture chamber. And that's why I'm sitting here, is I'm trying to balance what I did there with that life. And so it's like, when I found that out, I was like, oh my goodness. And so now I'm cleaning up that stuff and cleaning up it in myself. I believe it has a big impact. And this is where bringing back to every one of us, doing our part, I believe that's the biggest, most important part of that we.
But I don't believe you're one of the psychopaths. So,
No.
so I'm trying to still figure out who are the psychopaths, even though I understand you're accepting responsibility.
Well, you could probably answer this just as well, but I'll take a shot at it. What Fred was saying is, yes, there are factions and there's infighting, and yet these people do know each other, and there are different groups. And there's one of a good source to gain some of this information is Joseph Farrell and his books. And he very much, it's like his books are built like a thesis, and very well researched, very modulated. He's not shouting in his work. And he takes some really close looks at the evolution of this and where the money came from. A lot of it came after World War II. The Nazis had amassed a huge amount of gold. The Japanese had. They hid a lot of it. They got a lot of it out. Both sides did. But also the U.S. ended up with a lot of it, which then funded covert operations here, huge amounts of wealth. And with money, before it was, you know, the nobility and they could rule the serfs, this was an incredible amount of wealth that became available. And with money comes the ability to do things. And so they also, banking, and Farrell traces our banking system back through, you know, through Venice and back to Sumeria, and the patterns of banking that are still here today. They were developed, you know, well developed 1,000 years ago. And so there's a way to follow some of these threads of these different factions. And just like if you have a common enemy, you band together. And if you don't, you squabble among each other. Yes. And that's much of what happens among these groups. So when we look at them, they can look amorphous. And that's kind of how they prefer it because then you can't find the commonalities and the pieces that help you make sense of them. But it runs through the banking system in New York, and it goes through in London. There's an Asian one. There's at lower levels are the drug cartels that are used by everyone, and it feeds everyone. There's the European royalty or nobility moneyed people, Rothschilds and all those, and they're kind of partly with the banking, and yet the banking are upstarts, and so they don't want to have much power, but they've got power because they do have, whoever controls the money controls everything. So you watch them, and there is this infighting. A parallel that has made sense for me is to go back and look at Greek mythology, Greek and Roman mythology. Okay, and here are these hugely powerful deities squabbling and thunderbolts and raping each other, and and basically there's your map. So it kind of helps, the brain go, they really are that nuts, and yet they wield thunderbolts. So you kind of have to pay attention. And what do you do with it? So all the things that have been beautifully described here are things that we can do to no longer be the peons controlled by these titans. And there's a certain, I love mythology, and I kind of thought that that mythology was describing these forces. But Farrell is great. Joseph Mars, Rise of the Fourth Reich.
Jim Mars.
Jim Mars. And quite a few of them, some up on the table. I didn't go so much into that, but if you get some of that history, it's very well written. It'll start to make sense.
Farrell is F-E-R-A-L?
Farrell.
Yeah, I think so.
Joseph P. PhD. E-L? Well, you'll find it. Joseph P. Farrell. One of his books is up there. And if you put Joseph P. Farrell, however it's spelled, you'll find him.
And George, I would just add, if you go to wanttoknow.info and do a search on hidden hand, I think it will give you some intriguing thoughts that will help with that question. It's called the hidden hand material. It's just fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I can add anything to that. I think that pretty much sums it up.
So the idea of network or individual groups that just happen to be doing it on their own, we can't parcel that out.
It just doesn't fit into neat boxes.
Some of the stuff we're seeing is actually they're infighting.
Yes.
And they're sending signals. Oh, you stepped on my territory.
Yep.
That just happened. I'll show you.
Yep.
And
Russia right now.
that's right.
Oh,
exactly.
Syria. Syria right now.
Syria, yes. Pawns.
The Russian bloc.
Crimea. Yeah, it's
Oh, yeah, what's going on in Syria right now? It's very clear. Russia has more power than you might imagine because they've had access not only to this technology. Like I said, they were more advanced than the U.S. And the U.S., many scientists won't believe it. The Russian scientists almost all believe this stuff. They also believe in psychic stuff, and our scientists all want to poo-poo. So they're using psychic stuff, and the U.S. has power and might. But the Russians have this finesse, and they're coming in and saying, you think you have power? And so you watch behind the scenes, the Russians are, and I'm not saying the Russians are good guys, but I'm saying they're another faction that has as much power in different ways than the U.S. And so Syria is a clear example of this infighting, and I just kind of laugh at what's going on there. It's tragic.
Yes.
But it's tragic on one level. On another level, it's these power, it's throwing the thunderbolts.
yes. Okay,
I might also add that science in this country is really not taught very well, and for those that do teach it well, my hat's off to them. But also, people just don't understand science, and I'll admit I'm one of them. Okay, I was not taught science, and I don't like science as a result of it. But you take this information over to Europe or other countries, and you guys echo me if I'm correct in this, that they get it. They understand the technology much more than we do. I mean, fourth graders over there get it to the point where, you can explain to them how a lot of this stuff works, and they understand it. But a lot of people here just can't grasp the technology, I guess. So.
Around science, Farrell
Around
is
science.
good on this, but I was raised in science, and I love it, and physics, and what the Nazis did was reject, because Einstein was a Jew. They would not listen to his theories, and they took a different track, and they were more on track. And their approach to physics and field physics catapulted their work. That's why Operation Paperclip was a race against the Soviets, and actually they divvied up the material. But that was a race to get the Nazi scientific information. And then they fought over it, but they kind of knew they had to kind of balance it too. But the Nazis really took a different approach, and I think that's part of why in Europe, it is more known. They didn't go down a partially blind alley that we did in this country, and there's the possibility that the reason we got the bomb first is because we got materials from Germany. And there's a whole lot of, it's a chess game. It is truly a chess game. And they're balancing powers, and they're getting each other, and the other place to look is look at the mafia, and the Dons, and what their territory is, and who's poking who, and sabotaging who. This is going on. But they kind of understand that the powers kind of have to be there. They're there, if they're united against anyone, they're united against the masses who could gain this information and rise up against them. So when push comes to shove, they'll make sure each other stays in power and stays elite rather than be exactly. And what we're doing is this.
Yeah.
So,
Great
anything
question.
else? Yeah, great.
Start here.
I'm curious about what any of you know about or think about HAARP and the interface that may have with climate, which is either controlled or not controlled, and the fact that there are now many countries that have HAARP projects. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
HAARP is actually in my documentaries, and I spoke with Dr. Nick Begich, who wrote Angels Don't Play This HAARP, as well as other people for the documentary. So
Can you just quickly, for those that don't know about HAARP?
HAARP is the High Altitude Auroral Research Program. It's stationed in Alaska, and basically it's a series of antenna. It's like 180 antenna now.
I think they're higher than that.
However, they closed it. They did close it. So this was run by DARPA, and basically they were shooting radio signals into the atmosphere, bouncing them off the ionosphere, and bringing them back to the Earth to do things like communication with submarines, for example, submerged submarines, and also for looking for things like hidden tunnels or caves and things where people might be hiding. Tomography, yeah. So anyway, as far as I know, it's shut down. But is that a case of where it's just gone black?
Yes.
And they're using it secretly.
Absolutely.
Or they had
That's
something
what I
better.
agree to. Yeah. And I think that we kind of blew the lid off of it. About Nick Begich, my documentary, and all of us here.
Yes.
And so they realize, oh, they're onto us. So now we need to. So yeah, it has, from what I understand, it does have climate and weather changing technologies. But maybe Fred can talk more about it.
Well, yeah, there's no doubt that the Bernard Eastlund, I believe, is the guy who was behind the original ARP. He gave the thesis that they took on, and he said this absolutely can be used for altering weather in big ways. And it's in his patent. And if you want to know and do a search on our HAARP page, you'll find you can actually go read the patent that he wrote, and it describes all the capabilities. And this is in the 80s. And so there's pretty much little doubt that it can be used for those capabilities. The big question is, actually, has it been or not? I personally believe it has been in a major way. But there's little proof, there's lots of evidence that HAARP is being used around the world, and the whole thing would be closed down. It just meant it went black, because if something gets too much attention, they make it go black. Just like MK Ultra, we're not doing that stuff anymore.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore. Sure.
Right. Another piece with the HAARP, though, is at one point one of the directors admitted there were 19 different agencies using the HAARP for different kinds of research. And one of the things that I understood was happening too is that they were using it to experiment with putting frequencies that affect mental and emotional states.
Oh, yeah.
And bouncing that off and focusing it. And there were times, and I have a feeling my sense was they were probably using the West Coast quite a bit for this, for probably a variety of reasons. But sometimes you'd look up at the sky and there was this exactly perfect crisscross in the sky. Not the macro sky, you know, that is kind of fluffy that way, but actually just perfectly lined up. And I go, oh man, they're at it again. But you could feel.
Jet trail she's talking about.
No. No. Sometimes when you have a cover, sometimes after now they call it aerosols spraying, but the chemtrails, they would spread out, and they would help them, I suspect, monitor maybe from satellites to see the patterns. This is my guess. But even when you couldn't, there were times you could feel, and I had some other friends who were tuned into that, and you could feel there's something going on. And you can sense it in your body when they'd be playing around with those frequencies.
Yeah.
And they've developed that. And when I heard they were shutting it down, I said, well, either it's gone black or they have something better now.
It's the ELF waves, the
Yes.
extremely low frequency
Yes.
waves, and when they bounce back, they can actually target large geographic areas.
Yes.
So they can cause things like, just panic or passivity or even aggression in people by monitoring or changing, fluctuating the different kind of waves that they're sending. And so, I used to always think, oh man, I'm having a bad day, and I would talk to Karen, yeah, I had a bad day. I had a bad day too. And you talk to enough people and you find out everyone's having a bad day. And it makes you wonder,
Exactly.
I mean,
Yes.
could it all be related to this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yep.
Questions?
And again, it's anecdotal. Because
Yes.
we don't happen to have their list of experiments for that particular
Yes.
day, but we can observe. And if we talk with people, and I check with my clients too, and what's happening, because I get to hear much more of what's going on with them emotionally. But talk to our friends, see, is this more big? It's not just me. Oh, okay. Well, maybe we're all being affected. And then we can go, okay, this is the time to drop in. Okay, and not be pulled by that.
I just had a question. Do you guys know much about CERN? Have you heard of CERN? Can you give me what your take it is on that? And yeah.
Fred, you said
Well, the one, CERN is the particle accelerator in Europe that is taking super high speeds and exploring, all sorts of wild stuff through physics. And the one thing, I so wish I had saved the video, but there's a video of the guy in charge of the project, and he's being asked, we've heard there's a possibility that this could actually create a black hole that swallows up the family. And he says, swallows up the family. That's an interesting little slip there. Swallows up the world. And he actually says on videotape, there's a 2 to 3% chance or something like that could happen, but we're going to do it anyway. And he laughs. And I saw the video of this, and it's like, whoa, you're going to carry out an experiment that has a 2 to 3% chance of destroying the planet.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa.
Right.
So that's the one thing I know about CERN.
What I'm looking to know is kind of sounds also like similar to the HAARP, how it controls people's emotions.
Haven't heard that about CERN as much. CERN is much more a subatomic physics, whereas HAARP is big wave frequencies being spread around the planet.
And there's many different countries that have a portion of it.
Yes.
There's one piece that the CERN does open a possibility to, and it's what I suspect is some real practical research into the 0 point.
Mm-hmm.
And accessing that, and which I believe there are already good technologies and abilities. And I know someone personally who actually sold something to the Japanese, a technique for pulling 0 point energy. But I have a feeling they're really looking at how they can start to control that better. And so they will have the unlimited power source for them. I don't know who else of us will have access to it.
Good question. I thought it was interesting, too, that it kind of paralleled what happened with the early atomic bomb tests, that there was some concern that light the atmosphere on fire.
Yes.
Talk about psychopathic behavior.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I hate to be the one to put an end to this, but we need to close this now. I forgot to say earlier, a very special thanks to our staff here, Aaron Miller and his assistants, Sean Meek. I want you to applaud these people, please. They did tremendous work. Kat Sauter and Lori Wagner have been just tremendous, tremendous help with this event. Could not have done it without these great people. And of course, the panel. You have been passed out these little questionnaires that was created 11th hour, last minute style by the staff. If you wouldn't mind spending a minute giving us some feedback, which is very important for us as we prepare for our next event in January that I hope by now you are all very aware about. Very aware of. This is January 16th and 17th in San Rafael, California.
Awesome speakers. They're
Just down the road.
Yes.
Thank you for the testimonial. Here, let's get that on tape.
And it's
Let's
the
get that on
next
tape.
step after this one.
Yes, every one of those speakers are just phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah.
They really are.
And it's a testament to Jordan's ability to be a connector and
Gather 'em all.
collaborator to pull these all
Thank
together.
you, Fred. Go ahead and read them if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we've got Danny Sheehan, one of the most amazing lawyers on the planet, who handled the Karen Silkwood case and the Pentagon Papers and knows just everything about everything. Unbelievable.
From Santa Cruz.
Yeah,
Yes.
Catherine Austin Fitz, former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under, was Bush 1? And she saw the shenanigans going on, and she's just a straight shooting gal.
Yeah.
And she just calls it like it is, and she almost got put in jail. She got dragged through $6 million worth of legal stuff, and she knows what's going on with the financial stuff. Unbelievable. You hear her talk, and she's just like, whoosh, absolutely amazing. You've got the Gambles, Foster and Kimberly Gamble, who put Thrive movie together, and if you don't know about that, see thrivemovement.com. Great summary of everything that's going on and all the cover-ups and everything. Richard Doolin is probably the most respected person of the UFO cover-up. He's written some amazing books with very solid research using the best sources
And false flag.
and false flag stuff. Joel Garvin is one of the top voices on new energy. So not just solar and wind, but absolutely the 0-point new energy technologies. And he's just a great, great guy. So every one of these people is really awesome.
Thank you.
Good.
Thanks,
Gotta
Fred.
hire me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wasn't planning on getting that kind of a testimonial from one of our speakers here, but I'll certainly echo that too, as all the panel is nodding in affirmative. It's a great privilege for us to be able to bring those kinds of people to this area. And I think that closes our event today.